Throughout the history, dictators, monarchs, and despots tried to suppress knowledge in order to control ideas and narratives. Richard Ovenden, in his book Burning the Books: The History of Knowledge Under Attack, says that throughout the history, dictators have tried to burn the books and burn the libraries in order to control ideas and knowledge. Beginning with the burning of Library of Alexandria to the burning of Library of Louvain by Nazi Germany, there is a long history of burning the books where dictators were threatened by the power of libraries and they tried to burn the books because books always spread the ideas in the people that led to the demise of the governments of the dictators and kings and despots. In his book, Burning the Books, Richard Ovenden says that libraries are necessary for the health of a society. The societies where there are books and libraries are healthy societies, and the societies where there is no culture of reading and bookkeeping, those societies are not healthy societies. About the beginning of libraries, Richard Ovenden writes that the first library was built by Ashurbanipal in Nanway. That was the first library in the world. And Ashurbanipal collected manuscripts that were related to different subjects and he built the first library of the world. In this regard, Richard Ovenden says the discovery of Ashurbanipal's library led to deciphering the knowledge contained in the collections that was truly to transform our understanding of the ancient world. It shows that through the discovery of Ashurbanipal's library, we came to know about the importance and the knowledge of the ancient world. Moreover, Richard Ovenden writes that Royal Library of Ashurbanipal was perhaps the first attempt to assemble under one roof the entire corpus of collectible knowledge that could be assembled at the time. In the second chapter of the book, Richard Ovenden writes about the Library of Alexandria that was known as the Google of ancient times because it had the manuscripts related to zoology, botany, chemistry, literature, and all the subjects of the world. But this library was burned in order to control the knowledge. In this regard, Richard Ovenden says that Alexandria is the archetypal library of the Western imagination and is still often referred to as the greatest library ever assembled by the great civilization of the ancient world. And it was a single place where the entire knowledge of the world was stored, has inspired writers and librarians throughout the history. It was a library that had the golden treasure that were books. There are different stories about the burning of the Library of Alexandria. It is said that it was burned by Caesar, as Richard Ovenden says that the library was burned in Alexandrine War when the city was sacked under the dictator Caesar. Caesar was a dictator who wanted to destroy the knowledge and books. So that is why he burned the books and he burned the Library of Alexandria. And as a result, the great treasure of knowledge that came from Greeks and Romans, it was lost. Ovenden writes that in burning the Library of Alexandria, the great works of Greek writers were lost, and also the writings of a great poet Sappho were lost. After the burning of the Library of Alexandria, the knowledge came to the Muslim civilization, and Muslims collected the books written by Greek writers and authors and translated them into Arabic language. And then this translation was taken to Europe that led to Renaissance in Europe. In this regard, Richard Ovenden writes that mass availability of paper enabled Muslims to develop a sophisticated book culture, As a result, libraries, paper sellers, and booksellers became a common sight in Baghdad, where traders in books and papers were renowned as men of learning. This culture soon spread to other cities across the Muslim world. It shows that Muslims got interested in knowledge, learning, and education, and they gave importance to books. And Baghdad was known as the city of knowledge that collected a lot of books that were written by Greeks and then they translated them, and Baghdad became a center of learning during the Muslim reign. Moreover, Richard Ovenden says, from Islamic Spain to the Abbasid kingdom in Iraq, libraries sprang up. So it shows that the libraries sprang up during Muslim rule in Spain and Baghdad. There were great libraries in Syria and Egypt, over 70 libraries in Spain, and 36 in Baghdad alone. The first public collections in this great city being assembled during the reign of Al Mansur, the founder of Baghdad. And this process was taking place during the reign of Al Mansur in Baghdad. And Baghdad became a city where the people were full of knowledge and ideas assembled. And further, Richard Wenden says that his successor Harun al-Rashid also focused on libraries. Harun's son, the Caliph al-Mamun, established the House of Wisdom, founded in the 8th century as a library and an academic institute devoted to translations, research, and education, attracting scholars from all over the world from many cultures and religions. And it shows that Muslim civilization and Muslim knowledge and learning was so diverse that it attracted people from all over the world and from all the cultures and from all the religions. In the third chapter of the book, Richard Ovenden writes that during the Reformation in England, libraries were destroyed because in Reformation, the monasteries were destroyed that contained a lot of books, and in destroying the monasteries, books were also destroyed. But there were few priests and religious men who thought that books are very important for the health of the society and for the present and the future of the society. So they sacrificed their lives in order to save books. The Reformation was started by Martin Luther in England that led to the destruction of monasteries. In this gloomy condition, there was a man, Bodley, who thought that if all the monasteries are destroyed, as a result, all the books and libraries will be destroyed. So he tried to save the books and developed the Library of Bodley. And in developing the Library of Bodley, he disinherited all his family members and gave all his wealth to the library. The writer says that Bodley saved very important books and texts from burning, and one of them was Magna Carta. In this regard, he writes, many important documents were preserved by Bodleian. The Magna Carta is the one that had the most profound impact over time. It shows that Bodleian Library saved Magna Carta, and Magna Carta was one of the most important and influential political texts that led to the development of the modern democracy. So we can say that Bodley, by saving the books, saved the democracy. In the next chapter, Richard Ovenden writes that when America got independence from British, they had a war in 1814, and when in 1814 Britishers were fighting the war against United States, they burned the Library of Congress, and British soldiers set fire to a large library and 1,000 of books. After the end of war, the United States government thought of making the library again, but they had no books. The government requested Thomas Jefferson to sell his personal library to the government so that a good library may be set in the United States. In this regard, Richard Ovenden writes that out of the ashes of the first Library of Congress, a new and better library was to emerge. The chief agent for this renewal had been one of the intellectual architects of the American Revolution and the foundation of the United States, Thomas Jefferson. So the government buys the books of Thomas Jefferson and sets a new library. In the next chapter, the writer discusses about the burning of the writings of different writers from Virgil to Kafka. He says that when Virgil wrote Aeneid, he asked his friend Varius to burn the epic, but he did not burn the epic. In the same strain, Kafka asked his friends to burn his writings. He had two friends. One was a girl, Dora Diamond, and the second was Max Brod. Dora Diamond had a lot of writings of Kafka, and Kafka asked her to destroy his writings after his death. Although Dora Diamond said that she has destroyed the books of Kafka, but she did not destroy them. But his writings were burned by the Nazi agency Gestapo when they came to the house of Dora Diamond. And Max Brod did not burn the writings of Kafka because he thought that through this Kafka will live in us. And Richard Ovenden says that Kafka's writings are very important in the modern and postmodern age, and they have become a part of our collective consciousness. When we look at the trial, metamorphosis, and a hunger artist, we see that it is a very important part of literature. Related to the importance of Kafka's writings, Richard Ovenden writes that imagine our culture without the trial or metamorphosis. We sometimes need the bravery and foresight of private curators like Max Brod to help ensure the world has continued access to the great works of civilization. He says that Max Brod did not burn the writings of Kafka, and in this way he has helped humanity. In the next chapter, the writer talks about the burning of the Library of Louvain in Belgium. This library was burned by Germany during First World War. In this regard, Ovenden writes, Belgian civilians were forcibly removed from their homes and summarily executed, including the mayor and the rector of the university. Around midnight, German troops entered the university library and set it on fire using petrol. The entire building and almost all of its collections, modern printed books and journals, as well as the great collections of the manuscripts and rare books, were destroyed. It shows that Germany had destroyed the very important books and manuscripts that were stored in the Library of Louvain. Although in the Hague Convention of 1907, Germany had agreed that during the war, hospitals, religious places, and libraries will not be burned. But when the war erupted, they forgot about this and burned the Library of Louvain. Moreover, Ovenden says that all the Germans were not like that. There were some who believed in the preservation of knowledge, and one of them was Adolf von Harnack. He writes, not all Germans felt this way. Adolf von Harnack, director of the Royal Prussian Library in Berlin, a great biblical scholar in his own right and one of the signatories of the Manifesto of the 93, wrote to the Prussian Minister of Culture to suggest appointing a German official in the occupied Belgium to ensure that libraries would not be damaged in the rest of the war. It shows that Harnack was interested in preserving the knowledge, and that is why he wrote to his government that Belgian libraries must be taken care of in order to preserve the knowledge. In the next chapter, Ovenden writes that Nazi Germany burned almost 10 million books during 1930s. And one of the most important events related to burning of the books was on 10th May 1933, in which a lot of books were burned by the Nazis, and the young people watched it and said, Hail Hitler. When the Nazis were destroying the books and libraries, at that time Jews were saving the books. There were few Jews who took the book from libraries through a tunnel and they collected them at a place, and Ovenden calls them the paper brigade. During this struggle, Jews saved thousands and millions of books that were stolen from the Nazi Germany and saved. In this regard, Richard Ovenden writes that books have always been central to Jewish religion and culture. A myriad other books have immense significance in the life of Jewish and traditionally in Jewish culture. True wealth was measured in books. It was charity to loan them, and many special laws grew up around the treatment of books. It shows that Jews were very interested in books and they considered them sacred. And that is why when the Nazis were burning the books, Jews were saving the books. In the next chapter, Richard Ovenden writes about two literary authors who were husband and wife. One was Sylvia Plath and the other was Ted Hughes. After the death of Sylvia Plath, Ted Hughes burned the writings of Sylvia Plath, and when he was asked that why he had burned the writings of Sylvia Plath, and he said that he wanted to save the reputation of his wife. But the critics are of the opinion that Ted Hughes had a very bad relationship with his wife, and he tortured her that led to her suicide, and she had written some negative things about Ted Hughes in her writings, and he wanted to save himself. In this regard, he writes, the precise details of Plath's state of mind are unknowable, not least because Hughes destroyed Plath's journals. Hughes claims the act was to protect Plath's reputation and to save their children from reading harrowing entries in the journals written in the days leading to her suicide. Many have speculated that the destruction could rather have been motivated to protect Hughes' own reputation. So, Hughes destroyed the writings of Sylvia Plath in order to save his own reputation. In the next chapter, the writer writes about the destruction of library in Bosnia and goes on to say that the destruction of the library led to a severe problem in Bosnia, that they were unable to teach their next generation because their library was destroyed. And he says, destroying the library struck at the heart of Bosnia's culture and crippled the university's ability to educate the next generation. In the next chapter of the book, the writer says that Europe had colonized the world, and during colonization, they treated the colonized mercilessly and they were involved in killings and massacres. But when the colonies got independent, the Europeans brought all the documents and writings with themselves in order to hide their dark reality. And in some cases, they burned the documents in order to save their reputation. And he says that it is the demand of democracy that the colonized and the independent nations must be provided with all the documents that the Europeans have in their custody. In the last chapter of the book, Richard Ovenden writes that how libraries and books are important, and he tells 5 ways in which libraries are good for the healthy functioning of a society. The very first function of the libraries that he mentions is that they support the education of society as a whole and of specific communities within it. It shows that libraries are related to education, knowledge, and learning. Secondly, they provide a diversity of knowledge and ideas. Thirdly, they support the well being of citizens and the principles of the open society through the preservation of key rights and through encouraging integrity in decision making. It shows that libraries and books are necessary for the open societies, as George Orwell also says that books always lead to the open societies. Fourthly, they provide a fixed reference point, allowing truth and falsehood to be judged through transparency, verification, citation, and reproducibility. This is the most important thing related to the present age, where truth and falsehood has mixed, and one cannot decipher what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong, what is true and what is false. So he says that books tell us what is true and what is false. Finally, they help root societies in their cultural and historical identities through preserving the written record of those societies and cultures. So, societies and cultures and civilizations live through the time as a result of libraries and writing.